Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
let's start because you have now literally, 12 minutes from the moment you start. I'll give you a warning at 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Please start without any further ado. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me in this Evidence for Development What Works Global Summit 2021. My title of the presentation is Job Search, Employability Skills, Job Mobility of Youth Migrant Workers in India. I will give a brief background of my study that job search, in the process of job search, social network is being used, and that social network is also helpful for the migration process. And as per the various studies, earlier studies, that labor mobility, labor employability traits revolves around intrinsic features as well as exogenous features. But intrinsic features like personal attributes, the skills, experience, expectations, attributes, attitudes, flexibility, willingness, strength, and so forth are the personal attributes for labor employability. And also that the interactions of these personal attributes in the labor market with the employer, that matters in the labor employability. And this is expected that the similar trend, the similar pattern attributes are expected for the Northeast migrants in the city of Bangalore in India. The migrant workers were expected to keep on changing. They change their job mainly because of their job remunerations, expectations, and the ability to change their job is primarily depending on the labor employability skills, particularly the intrinsic skills. The literature further says that job seekers depends on the social networks to collect the employment information, because the labor market information is imperfect, and the job information is because of the presence of job information asymmetry. However, obtaining a job is constrained by the intrinsic employability skills that can be enhanced through education and training. As I said earlier, the lab literature have shown that the personal attributes, particularly intrinsic skills of the laborers, like the flexibility, commitments, honesty, this reliability, these things are in fact interplay in the for the migrant workers in India. And the purpose of my paper, the objective is that to examine the job search behaviors and the nature of employment, the employability attributes, and the job mobility of the youth migrants from Northeast India to the city of Bangalore in India using a primary data.
Dr. Marchang, if I might intervene, you have 10 more minutes from this point, so I don't know how many slides you have. You need to sort of pace yourself accordingly.
Yeah. The study is based on the primary data which was collected way back in 2018 using a semi-structured questionnaires, and we draw a sample using the mixed method. So we had a sample of 255, and I'll straight go to the few results that the migrants were mostly educated people. 94% of the workers were educated who had completed matriculation and above, and were mostly from the arts and the humanities subject, and were mostly had an English medium education. So that enables their capability of for enhancing their communication, and also the possibility to migrate to other cities and finding a job in the labor market, corroborating with their educational qualifications and skills. In fact, among the samples, there were overqualified workers. 14%, approximately 14% of their total migrant workers in Bangalore claim that they have excess qualifications than the prescribed qualifications. That shows that they are, some of the migrant workers did not get employment corroborating to their educational qualifications and skills. People migrated from northeastern region to Bangalore basically because of the lack of employment opportunity. Majority of the people, around 61% of them, migrated to the city of Bangalore because of the lack of job opportunities, and also due to job dissatisfactions with their previous employment at the origin of migration. The behavioral job seeking, which is being highlighted in the literature as well as in this from the field data, is that social networks helps in getting employment. Particularly, around 70% of the migrant workers depends on the through the social network to gather the job vacancy information. And this makes largely the informal job information. And irrespective of this irrespective of the nature of sources of job vacancies, or either formal or informal, the majority, around 80% of the people, did not come across like the mentioning of ways in the job vacancy information. So particularly this is it implies that the employer did not divulge the salary or ways during the advertisement, perhaps to strengthen their employers' bargaining powers. The workers do not wait for a long period of time for their present employment, particularly because of the nature of job search through social networks, and also that somewhat assures that their job or to get the employment. So in an average, the period of waiting for a job is around 1 to 18 months, and the majority of them got the job within a period of 3 months. Perhaps that relates with the flexibility in the seeking and choosing their occupations. Even among the new workers, that is the new labor entrants in the labor market, that about 86% of their job, they got job within a period of 3 months. That is contradicting. That is contradicting to the earlier findings of recent years in India about the educated unemployed people. This implies that the Northeast migrants, particularly in the city of Bangalore, mostly do not remain unemployed for a long time, indicating the migrants possess the characteristic of labor employability, that they are flexible, adjustable, depending on the prevailing labor market conditions. That is perhaps caused by their economic conditions and they are unable to remain as an unemployed people, particularly because of their modest economic background, maybe. And one particular findings from the studies is that migrants did not find jobs, did not seek for a specific job. Majority of the migrants did not seek for a specific job. That is particularly implying that they were ready to take up any jobs irrespective of the occupations. Perhaps among those who seek a particular job, 93% do find job within 3 months, and among those who were not seeking who were seeking a specific job, they were able to get job within 3 months of times. 88% of those unemployed, of those workers who were seeking for a specific job got employment within 3 months period of time. The implication is that to some extent that aspiring and seeking for a specific job takes a little longer period of for getting a job. So, and the labor employability challenge appears to be a little insignificant for the Northeast migrants in the city of Bangalore. They were mostly working in the private organized sector, and around 97% of them were working in the private organized sector. So it highlights two aspects: that why people were not able to work in the semi-government or the government as an employee is because mainly labor employability is due to the lack of skill and knowledge, and also inability to afford for a competitive jobs, or because of the economic pressure. And the single largest occupations where the Northeast migrant workers were working in Bangalore was the corporate sectors, around 37%, which was followed by the retail executive, in the retail sector. The employability skills, coming to the employability skills, that communication is the foremost employability attributes for the Northeast migrant workers in the city of Bangalore. And this second prominent skills were ability to guide and skills to take up any responsibilities. There, the migrant workers, around 61% of the migrants do claim that they have a permanent job, and consider around 32% of them were working in a temporary job, and 7% migrant workers were on the contractual job. Majority of them, more than half of the workers, irrespective of the type of workers, contractual or permanent or the temporary, they were having a job agreement. But unfortunately, 44% of them, of the entire worker, do not have a job agreement. That may be the major reason for job insecurity and job loss, and also for job mobility. Willingness, the literature shows that the willingness to change a job is one of the characteristics of labor employability, which is also found in our studies, in my studies, that many workers keep on changing their employment out of the entire migrant workers. 31% were working in their first job, and the majority of the workers, around 69%, were working in their second or subsequent employment. And the nature of job mobility, job change, is mostly of intra-change of employment rather than the interchange of employment. Perhaps because it is more convenient and easier to have an intra-employment mobility rather than the interchange mobility. Why people do change their employment is basically because of the low remuneration. That is related that also causes the instability of employment, and they eventually change their employment from one to another employment avenue. So here, the finding shows that two major components. One is the low remunerations issues and the working environment problems. So those are two major causes for job mobility among the migrant workers. And among the migrant workers, the current migrant workers, there are also a component of who were also seeking for new jobs or another job because of the job dissatisfactions. Around 20% of the total migrant workers were seeking for a new job, mainly because of wanting for a stable employment and a permanent job and a decent job and more remunerative job, and also for professional growth and career growth, and additionally to work in a pleasant environment. So the basic reasons of continuous job mobility, continuous job switch, is particularly because of the low remuneration as well as the environment, working environment issue. In conclusion, I'd like to draw the conclusion that in the process of job search, the social networks helps and enables to them to get a job within a shorter period of time. And the best, the primary employability attributes is the intrinsic skills, particularly the communication, flexibility in the job choice and job search, and because of the job insecurity and because of the low wages to improve their wages, not as migrant workers in the cities like Bangalore often switches their job from one job to another, particularly intra-job movement is prevalent. I conclude with this note. Thank you all. Sir.
Okay, Robert, please unmute yourself and start.
Oh, thank you, Professor. Okay, thank you for welcoming me to this conference. Let me just share my presentation. Yes, can you see the full view of my presentation?
Not yet. No.
Okay. Sorry about that.
You have to click on that computer logo, and as you can just click it, and it'll give you the rights to share your screen. Yes, now we can see.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Welcome.
Okay, do you see the full view?
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, so thank you for welcoming me to this conference. My presentation on youth employment. The title is Youth Employment Evidence and Gap Map, specifically looking at interventions to increase youth employment generally in the whole world. So here are the presenters, Robert Apunyo, Professor Howard White, and the rest, as you can see in this screen. Okay, so a quick outline. We'll have to acknowledge the people who have been involved in developing this evidence and gap map. We'll look at the objective, the methodology which we undertook, and then the results. So this evidence and gap map on youth employment interventions was prepared or produced by the Campbell Collaboration in a partnership with the Africa Center for Systematic Reviews and Knowledge Translation. The funding was provided by MasterCard Foundation together with the Youth Futures Foundation. Okay. Let's attempt to define what an evidence and gap map is. An evidence and gap map I am getting an echo. Oh, sorry. Okay, an evidence and gap map is a systematic presentation of the availability of relevant evidence for a particular policy domain. And this definition was put together by Saran and Howard in 2018. So in the generation of an evidence and gap map, normally we follow a clearly organized protocol. And normally protocols have to be published in order for you to go on with this EGM production process. So an evidence and gap map summarizes what evidence there is, but not what the evidence says. In other words, an evidence and gap map only tells us what evidence is available there in terms of published materials and the gray literature, but it doesn't tell us the details. For example, the size of the impact is not revealed by an evidence and gap map. Okay, so our main objective was generally to create a map of youth employment effectiveness studies. And these are basically impact evaluations. We did not include process evaluations in this evidence and gap map. So looking at the methodology, ideally, like any other evidence and gap map, the generation normally starts with the development of a framework. It is a framework which actually informs and guides the entire process on about that evidence. And generally, this framework is how the evidence gap map will eventually appear in a matrix format. So we started by developing that framework, and it was a consultative process involving the various people who were involved in the direct coding of studies, including also the funders. They were also involved in the development of this framework. So we can also look at the PICOs. The other thing is we did a search for studies from over 20 databases. Then the screening and selection of these studies was done in Uganda by the Africa Center for Systematic Reviews and Knowledge Translation staff, of course, guided by Dr. Howard White and the other team members who are in the various parts of the world. So data coding and management, again, was done by the same team. Okay, so this is our PICOs. population, intervention, comparison, and outcomes. For the interest of time, I will not go through of them. I will just highlight a few. The main one is that the main population was the youth aged 15 to 35 years. And these were from all countries of all, and it included all social status. The intervention was basically training. It was about training, upskilling. It was about support to employment, decent work policies, information, and then entrepreneurship promotion and financing. We did not have a comparator in this instance. So the outcomes are structured into economic, education and skills, entrepreneurship, employment, and welfare. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we basically looked for impact evaluations on youth employment interventions and systematic reviews of such impact evaluations. We did not include other studies which did not really look at the impact of the various interventions. So in other words, this evidence and gap map was about the effectiveness studies only. Okay, so quickly, I would like to look at the results. So what you see in here is the evidence and gap map, which we generally produced. And this evidence and gap map, as you can see, we have filters together and the other items in the menu. Just above there, we have a menu. So these are the things that you use actually to navigate the evidence and gap map, right? And in here, you have the interventions and the outcomes on top. So ideally, what you see, the bubbles you see in here represent the number of studies. And as you can see, when you point at any cell here, you are able to see studies which are available in that particular cell. For example, this particular cell here, which is being highlighted, had 14 low quality primary studies. Again, this evidence and gap map took a quality appraisal of studies. And so these studies are presented here in terms of the quality that they have. Okay, so, and this is just a snapshot of our evidence and gap map. Below here is a link, a web link to the protocol which we followed. So maybe later on, or if someone is taking a screen, you should be able to find this protocol in this web link. Okay, next. So looking at the evidence or the kind of studies which we found out by regions of the world in terms of income status, you can see that most of the evidence was coming from developed countries, or these are the high income countries. You can see 56% of the studies were conducted in those studies, and followed by upper middle income countries, and the low income countries were underrepresented with just 11%. Okay, so in here is what we call an aggregate map. It shows us the number of studies which were identified in terms of outcomes and interventions. So in this evidence and gap map, generally, most studies were about training, upskilling, and retraining. So generally, you can call it training. And you can see that most of the studies were in this area, with a total of 513 studies, at least mentioning this aspect of training. The second one was the support to employment. And then other presented was this information related intervention. job-related job-related information use. So presented with that is mentioning it. Aggregate map, you can see the coloring in here. Any studies which are represented or which have well represented evidence are these which are colored green. And normally these could be above 75 studies could have been reported. So you can see all the green. Then the next one, yellow, represents where evidence was moderate. And you can see that again, okay, the next one is the red. This is where evidence was really scarce. And this was below 25 studies. You can again see information. For example, information as an intervention had zero outcomes, zero economic outcomes. Okay, next. So after that, we would like to inform you that there are other steps which are going on, which are anyway stemming from the weaknesses of this EGM. For example, the EGM is about effectiveness studies. It doesn't tell us a lot about qualitative aspects. So we are now undertaking an update of this EGM by adding their process evaluations. And the product will be called an evidence and implementation gap and implementation issues gap map. The other activity which we are undertaking is conducting a qualitative review, which will be contained in the updated evidence and gap map. As you all know, effectiveness studies do not tell us about implementation issues quite often. They do not also quickly tell us about design issues. And yet these are very critical issues which affect the quality of interventions that are being implemented. So looking at or generating a qualitative review will help us in improving our understanding on this available evidence. Okay, this is the end of my presentation, but I would like to encourage you to visit one of these EGMs, the different versions. So the link is provided below here. So kindly, even after this presentation or in the process of this presentation, kindly find time and check in here. This link will lead you to an evidence and gap map, which is available at the website of Youth Futures Foundation. Thank you very much. But Chair, if you still have some minutes for me, I am happy to take go beyond this and actually have a look at the live evidence and gap map. Thank you very much.
Yeah, why don't you do that? We have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Good. Good. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I will have to unshare this screen as soon as it opens, and then I will come back with the.
Right. You can see you now. Right. Right. You can share the. You can see the screen.
Okay.
Can you maximize it?
It seems this is not going to work.
But it's okay. Why don't you speak to your substantive point rather than share screen? Just speak to your substantive. Explain what you were planning to say.
Okay, so what I was planning to do was actually to take you through a live evidence and gap map by showing members how this thing works, how you move around the evidence and gap map, and how you can search and also export the different details from this map. And one thing I need to really emphasize is when you get access to this map, for a researcher, for example, if you are conducting a systematic review, you can export all these studies from this evidence and gap map within just a matter of seconds. And then you can, so it's a very, very important source of studies, which you can really rely on.
Excellent. So, Robert, can you give us a sense of how many countries, because I think I might have missed that, unless, yeah, go ahead. How many countries do you have in this systematic review?
There
how many studies you spoke about, but how many countries?
There are over 120 countries in this evidence and gap map.
Right. Right.
Maybe one other thing I could say that this evidence and gap map also has an accompanying report, which actually describes what I'm trying to say now. And this report is not yet published, but if someone is interested in it, if there is urgency, we can always share this with the
right. I'm not seeing any questions, Robert and Dr. Marchang, in the chat box, so perhaps I'll press ahead with a few queries of my own. Dr. Marchang, earlier when you had just finished, I'll come back to you, Robert, in a minute. Dr. Marchang, when you were finished, I was asking, I assume that you did this primary survey in Bangalore prior to 2020, prior to the pandemic.
In the year of 2018.
18. Yeah. Now, what didn't come out from your study was what was the distribution of the education level of your sample? Because you were saying that about 2/3 of the people were getting jobs in the corporate sector or something like that, or rather half maybe. So that's pretty high. In other words, they were quite well educated. Yeah, do you want to explain that a little bit? Because there's an obvious correlation between where they're looking for jobs and whether they're going to, their expectation is a formal job or their expectation is not a formal job. Please go ahead.
Yes, I was saying that, I mean, from the field, we have found that most of the migrant workers from Northeast in the city of Bangalore, I mean, large chunk of the populations, migrant workers, around 30%, they were 30%. They were working in the corporate sector, like in the in the IT sector, the corporate.
No, but I was asking about the education level.
Yes.
Higher education level.
Yes, sir. Primarily the level of education, if what we call disaggregated in terms of the level of education, most of these who are working in the organized sectors were graduate and above, who have completed graduations and above, particularly in the corporate sectors, in the IT and all, and the BPO sector and all. So the higher educate, I mean the people who have completed graduations and above were mostly confining in the little higher paid job, and particularly in the retail sector and the hospitality sectors, they were there were around 48 so percentage of the workers were having the qualifications of 10 plus 10 and the 12 standard level. But in the organized sector and particularly in the corporate sector, majority were aware from the graduate and above qualifications.
Right. But you see, you also didn't say anything about their technical skills or their vocational skills. I mean, graduate is one thing. You one would have expected in a presentation like this that you might have spoken also about their technical skills, other than the fact that they were a graduate in history or English literature or political science. So it would have been useful to hear about what their prior technical skills were. Was there any relationship between not just their education and the sectors they were looking for jobs in, but also their technical
Yes.
Vocational skills.
Yes.
Would you want to elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, I like yes, of course. In my finding in the studies that the technical studies were skills, particularly the trainings which they have undergone while on the job, were also ascertained. And
okay, so they didn't come with pre-employment technical or vocational skills.
Yes, of course, there were some some share of the workers who were having a technical skills, particularly in the IT sectors and all.
Right. No, it would have been useful if this was sort of actually central to your presentation, because then we might have gotten a better idea of what the relationship was between pre-education. But did you sort of at all disaggregate the sort of, since I guess I cut you short, it's possible that there are many other things in the study that I didn't allow you to speak about. Did you differentiate between the kinds of jobs people were doing who had only general academic education on the one hand, or compared to those who had technical or vocational training on the other?
Yeah. Concerning the technical educational qualifications, majority, it was not very significant, but the technical professional skills were, were present, to some extent it was present. And in terms of this classification, because based on the, their occupations and their job and their, I do segregate that based on their qualifications, based on their nature of educational background, and also based on the types of occupation. And it is, it was found that those people who were also not in the technical, not with the technical educational qualifications, were also engaging in technical job, particularly like from the political science or some other social science background, because they provided, particularly in the corporate sector, provided the on-the-job trainings that is also enabling or enhancing their labor employability and also their working skills.
Right. Thank you. I'm not noticing any queries or questions in the chat box. So unless there are, Howard, if I might, I know that you're there. If I might ask you, can people be permitted to ask questions directly? We might, because we still have another sort of 10 minutes to go. Otherwise, I can pursue some issues with Robert. Howard? Okay, I'm not hearing from Howard. Robert, so if you would unmute yourself, please. Good, thank you. Given that you've done a large systematic review of a large number of studies across about 100 countries, I don't know how many countries there were in each of your systematic reviews, but let's assume that you have a very large cross-sectoral and cross-country database here. Would you like to sort of draw some broad conclusions for us in respect of, did you have any a measure for the sort of maturity of the skills ecosystem that was in place in these countries? Was that something part of your analysis? Meaning, is most of the training being done informally in the informal sector, or is most of the training getting done pre-employment in formal institutions, or is it getting done in pre-employment informal employers before they move on? So, because these are big issues that pervade the entire discussion around skills. Would you like to elaborate a little bit?
Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the studies were mainly coming from developed countries. And
developed or developing? Sorry, I missed that.
High-income countries.
High-income countries.
Good. So you notice that most of the training was coming from formal institutions, and predominantly also farms, and these are employers anyway. Yeah, but in the developing countries, most of the interventions were generally at initiative stages, with different actors being involved in implementing those interventions, including NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Yeah, so that is the kind of training which was there. Of course, looking at the Caribbean countries, they specifically have particular programs which look at short-term training. So again, when you look at these regions, the Caribbean countries, we are talking about South America, countries like Peru, Chile, they have specific interventions, and normally these are short-term training programs, which are just meant to move youth into jobs, and majorly targeting disadvantaged youth. I mean, these are people with low education status.
Oh, but Peru, Chile are actually upper middle income countries. There isn't any country in the Latin American continent which is, by World Bank definitions, a high income country. But anyway, I mean, I get your point. Did you, in your systematic review, have any low middle income countries? Because you've just mentioned sort of 2 countries which are upper middle income. Did you have any low middle income countries? Because the majority of countries in the developing world, in the global south, are actually low middle income countries, which have a per capita income of somewhere between $1,000 per annum per person and $4,000. Because the low income are those which have sort of a per capita income less than $1,000, majority of which, of course, are in Africa. So anyway, did you sort of look for any distinctions across those lines? Because clearly the upper middle income countries, which have a per capita income between $4,000 and about $12,000 per person per annum, may well have more formalized labor markets. So did you look for sort of some generalizations in your systematic review across these kind of issues, formal, informal, low middle income versus upper middle income?
Thank you. Maybe I need to make some clarification here.
Okay.
This was not a systematic review. It was an evidence and gap map, which ideally just presents studies which are available on a particular policy domain, for example, youth employment in this case. So we didn't go in detail looking at what you just described, but what I can say is that countries can be, intervention first of all can be grouped into the different countries, either whether they are low income, middle income, they can be grouped. And our report, the descriptive report, actually reveals that aspect.
It does.
Yes,
I didn't hear you speak about it. That's the reason why I'm asking.
Okay, thank you. So all that is in there. It would have been easier for even to quickly answer your question using that evidence and gap map. I do not know what you see now in the view. Are you actually seeing
the screen? You've shared a screen and I can see that.
Are you seeing a map? Red colors and a mixture of colors. Well, you may not be. It may have not worked.
I can see.
Okay, it may have not worked. I think we can continue with our conversation.
Right. Right. Okay, well, it seems that we are sort of nearly at the end of our session timing. We're sort of just 2 minutes away. Would either of you want to ask questions of each other? Robert of Marchang, or Marchang of Robert? We just have a couple of minutes left if you wish to. If not, that's fine. We can bring this session to a close because it would cut us off in another 1 minute in any case, from what I see of the timing. So thank you very much, Robert and Dr. Marchang, and look forward to seeing you another time. Okay. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Too, sir. Professor.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.